military command centers, ballistic missile bases, air defense networks, naval facilities, and key regime infrastructure. The opening strike was also a decapitation attack, killing Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and several senior military and security officials. Now, the world is picking sides. More and more nations are getting involved. Here's how things stand at the moment. This is where things are unfolding globally. Backing America are, of course, Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, Oman, France, Germany, Canada, Australia, Italy, UK, and Greece. On the other hand, you have Hezbollah in the Lebanon, Russia, China, and Colombia who are backing Iran. So clearly, of course, lopsided in terms of the global response given the large number of countries in the Middle East that have been targeted. However, as far as America's offensive is concerned, the targets include ballistic missile launchers, military airfields, Revolutionary Guard command centers, radar systems, and naval bases. More than 50,000 American troops, around 200 fighter aircraft, strategic bombers, and 2 aircraft carrier strike groups are now involved in the campaign against Iran. Let's quickly tell you what exactly is the estimate. About $210 billion, or at least 17.43 lakh crore is the estimate of the expenditure that has been put in place. Just the first across to our guests. With us is Ashok Sajanhar, former diplomat. Dr. Anand Ragnathan, author, is with us. Sierra Claire is a foreign policy analyst with us. Dr. Doron Avital is an ex-commander of Israel's elite special forces, or the Sayeret Patkal, and former member of the Knesset and Foreign and Security Committee as well. Ina Tanjan is senior fellow at the Taihe Institute and chairman of Asia Narratives. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. But Sierra Claire, I'd like to begin with you. Many questions about the legality and the manner in which the entire attack was carried out. While you have on the one hand Iran, which says that this was a vessel that was a guest of India. A few days ago, it participated in a maritime operation there, joint exercises there that were held at Visakhapatnam, and also the fact that these vessels are normally not armed and therefore was a sitting duck of a target. The big question is, all of this happening in the Indian Ocean, no information coming into Indian forces despite it being in the vicinity of India and a region, the Indian Ocean region, which India considers to be one of its areas of influence.
Right. Well, I know it's the U.S. Military policy not to alert anyone of attacks that they are planning before they happen. That's just operational security. I believe this attack was done by a submarine, and especially submarine movements are kept very tightly under wraps by the U.S. military, because submarines can be vulnerable when they're rising to the surface to do attacks or anything like that. So I would say that's the number one thing. And then in terms of, the legality of this attack happening in international waters, it's been said by multiple people, including members of the Trump administration, that this was completely legal to happen in international waters.
Oh, because there are many questions. In fact, let me bring in Ashok Sajanhar. Many questions about the legality. The war itself happening without, enough ratification coming in from the House over there. International protocols not being followed in terms of what needs to happen post an attack, particularly, helping those who've been attacked, so on and so forth. Is it correct to say, as Sierra saying, that international protocols have been followed, none have been violated? Ashok Sajanhar? Please unmute yourself and speak. Okay, there's a problem with that audio there. Let me bring in Dr. Ragnathan on that note. Dr. Ragnathan, the problem is this. The problem is that, of course, India and US have very close ties, but India also has close ties with Iran. And there's absolutely no reason that in today's modern day diplomacy, that should not or could not happen. The only question that many are very concerned about is that what if there were Indian ships in that vicinity, and heaven forbid, the torpedo or any other weaponry that was aimed at using against the Iranian ship had struck, say, for instance, a civilian ship of India's?
Good evening, Madhav, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Let me bring up two issues here. Number one, the topic of debate over the last, quite honestly, 24 hours has been the so-called abject surrender by Modi to America because of his conspicuous silence and the government not condemning this attack. Well, let me draw an analogy because, I'm just completely gobsmacked by the complete, illogic and irrationality of the people who are opposing Modi just for the sake of it. Madhav, let's say last week you invited me to a wedding where there were 80 guests or so. I came in my car and I parked my car on your driveway, attended the wedding, said thank you so much, and then left. Uh, a week later, my car was stolen from in front of my office on a public road where it was parked. How on earth is it your responsibility? How on earth are you liable? That is exactly what has happened out here. This vessel left our port a week ago. It was our guest, but for how long should it remain our guest? For a week, it was traveling away from India. It was not in Indian waters or our maritime borders or the EEZ. It was traditionally armed, but certainly you can put the case, even if it was not armed with the surface to air missiles that it normally is, such a frigate is, it was possibly doing surveillance. Now, it was sunk by its enemy, current enemy. India has got nothing to do with it. India controls only 2.9% of the entire Indian Ocean legally, and it did not send an SOS to India. Should we be liable? It's not our war. We had nothing to do with it. It was not in Indian waters. So this entire thing drummed up by the opposition that Modi is silent because Modi is complicit, you should have expressed your outrage, I think it's completely irrational. Now let me come to the first question that you asked, whether there was, this entire thing was above board or not. Well, to be honest, can you please tell me one thing over the last 1 year that Trump has done that is above board? We are no longer living in a rules-based society. When you have China, India, and the EU, all three of them purchasing massive amounts of Russian energy, including oil, and only India gets slapped with 25% tariffs. That's the rule that Trump dictates. So it's not a question of we should be following a rule when there is war. The clarity that at least in my is that there are two nations at war and India's got nothing to do with it.
Let me bring in Dr. Dora Navital. Dr. Dora Navital, the question that many are asking at this point of time is that while the fighting has spread across the Middle East, are we looking at it spreading in terms of the theaters of war across Asia, perhaps across other geographies as well? Because that is indeed the case. You're going to end up perhaps dragging in other countries, and many countries, like Turkey, for instance, which initially supported Iran and then got bombed by Iran itself, are going to be dragged in.
Yeah, I think this is the fear that an escalation that is far away even from the region becomes more regional or global. This is really was the fear in terms of weighing this war. I hope it would be contained within the region. The strategy of the Iranian is very clear. They do whatever chaos they can create, whatever havoc they can inflict in order in the end to force the end of this war and to stay in power. This is really their strategy. I mean, from a rational perspective, you understand the strategy, but it really, on the other hand, it's really bring more and more enemies to the game. So I'm not sure it's that wise, but that's what they do. They want to stay in power. They want this war to end.
But the point is, with Iran creating chaos, does that justify, launching this attack in the Indian Ocean region?
Would they justified what? The entry to the war? What's the question?
The submarine that fired the torpedo onto the Iranian ship.
Okay.
The point is that there are other geographies that are getting dragged into this particular war.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, there's a history, I'm not a naval man, I'm a special forces guy, but there's a history, the 1915 submarine German attack, the history in naval warfare in which events like this really trigger an escalation farther away from the regional area. So in terms of the legality that was raised up, I mean, the two states are in war, so international water, in some sense, it's legal. The sense of the rescuing of the Iranian naval soldiers in the sea, I think this is raises some question. I think it does, even in war, there's a code of war, there's a culture of war. I'm a believer in the culture and code of war, and they had to be assisted because they're in the water, they're helpless. It's part of the Geneva Accord, so this is too bad. I don't know exactly what the facts, but this is, maybe the attack is legal, but
Sierra Claire, there you go. You were defending the actions of the US Navy. Here you have Mr. Dora Navital, who's been the head of the Silent Batkal, and he says that the Geneva Convention and other codes have to be followed when it comes to war.
Well, the U.S. does follow the Geneva Convention. However, we are not a signatory to the UN Law of the Sea. And I think that's important to remember as well when we're looking at the different international laws and, who they apply to. The U.S. is actually not a signatory of that particular one.
Tanjin, you want to respond to that? Because very often it is the US that criticizes other countries for not following the international maritime law. And here you have a situation where they say we're not signatories or we haven't ratified the treaty, so on and so forth. Tanjin.
Well, I think she has her laws, Ryan. I actually am a lawyer. The Geneva Convention is separate from the UNCLOS. U.S. has always been a bit hypocritical, or not a bit, completely hypocritical. UNCLOS was started because the U.S. wanted to claim 200 miles of extraterritorial seaborne jurisdiction. And it resulted in an agreement. And then they said, well, we're not going to sign it because we do not believe that we are subject to any laws except the ones that we want to do. So first, get your facts straight. That would help. And then, when you start torpedoing boats that are not armed, please pick up the people. It's not necessary to walk away and pretend you didn't see them.
All right, Dr. Ashok Sajana, I'd like you to come in on this. The question that many are asking is this, that India has now said that it's joined the rescue effort. India has today gone and expressed their condolences as far as Ayatollah Khamenei's death is concerned at the Iran embassy. But many are questioning that has it taken a lot of pressure and has that come after too much of time? That's a question that many are asking. How do you view this from a diplomatic perspective?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madhav, for having me on the show. And sorry, my audio system didn't work the last time. But if you permit, I'll sort of very briefly respond to the question that you had asked earlier. But coming to this question about Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and his death and the condolence book that was signed by Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri. You see, as far as Mr. Ali Khamenei is concerned, meaning he was assassinated, that is something, head of spiritual leader, head of an religious community should not be treated in this manner, should not be killed in this manner. That's another thing. But as far as expression of condolence or showing remorse, etc., by the head of government of India, I don't think that comes in, because he did not really hold any constitutional position of a president or a prime minister or anything. He was the spiritual leader of a particular community. So that is, I don't think there was any protocol that necessitated that the prime minister should be saying something. And as far as expressing condolences in terms of the manner in which all this was done, I think our foreign secretary has gone and he has signed the condolence book. So I think on both in terms of propriety, it has been done, and also the fact that the prime minister there was no requirement, there was no need for the prime minister to do that. So that was done. As far as, the first question of that you had posed, and I think a very good analogy was provided by Dr. Ananda Ranganathan. And, I would go by that. As far as India's responsibility is concerned, this ship was in international waters. So as far as legally India's responsibility is concerned, it did not have. But that having been said, India is promoting the policy of what is called Sagar security of growth for all in the region, and the Mahasagar mutual and holistic, support for everyone, growth of everyone in the region. And that is basically to collaborate with all the countries, all the littoral states. And that is what we seek to do.
Right.
But here, when
there's a quick update coming in, gentlemen and ladies. Just a second. I'd just like to quickly read out what Donald Trump has told a publication. He says he wants to pick the supreme leader. I must be personally involved. This is a big statement coming in from President Trump that he has to be involved as far as the picking of the next supreme leader is concerned. Dr. Ranganathan, not entirely surprising when you know what Trump has said in the past. But how do you read the statement coming in from President Trump? A little too much involved in Iran and how the country is going to be governed, perhaps.
Yes, and he also said it's going to be a property dealer. No, but look, can I just first correct the lady on the panel that she was completely wrong about the Geneva Convention not talking about saving those who are shipwrecked because of an attack. The second Geneva Convention, GC2 Article 18.1, specifically mandates the party that has attacked to take, quote, all possible measures to search for and collect the shipwrecked, the wounded, and the sick, and to protect them, especially if they have been attacked by the attacker. So please correct your facts.
Sienna Claire, respond.
Well, actually, it's interesting because we litigated this whole thing back when we were doing the Venezuela strikes. And so I'm very familiar with this. Yes, the U.S. does follow the Geneva Convention. And as I said, we are a signatory on that. We're not a signatory of the UN Law of the Sea. So those are different, as I said. And in terms of what he just said, the requirements were met. The requirements were met. The caveat to all of those requirements in the Geneva Convention is that the people who are in the sea are not still viewed as enemy combatants. The U.S. had no way of confirming that, so therefore we were not responsible for search and recovery.
The ship was supposed to be unarmed, ma'am, and those men were just left to drown in the sea then. I mean, if that's certainly not following the Geneva Convention to the best of my understanding and from what Dr. Ranganathan just explained.
Well, as I said, we litigated this with the whole Venezuela thing. And so, you would have to consult with the military lawyers to get exactly what happened on a minute by minute update. But my understanding is that if the U.S. military cannot confirm that the people who are in the sea are still not enemy combatants, then the responsibility to rescue them does not take effect.
Something called the ethics of war. And Ina Tangent, I want you to come back in on this. The big question is that if there is a certain code and that code is for all countries to follow, it's about a larger human perspective when it comes to saving those lives.
Being clearly wrong. I mean, this isn't the point we should be arguing whether or not she has any understanding of the law. Obviously, she doesn't. So what we should be talking about is what is Iran doing? And what is the U.S. doing about it? Now, it seems to be a war that is spreading. What is Iran doing? Well, they're in a desperate situation. They think they're defending their home. What is their strategy? They cannot take on the United States directly militarily, but they can focus on the Straits of Hormuz and try to prevent any traffic going in. This would have a devastating effect on the Gulf countries and in turn on the US dollar, because it's the Gulf countries, the petrodollar, that replenishes everything. You cut that off, it's not only that the prices of oil, as we've seen, are going to go up. It could be between $100 and $300, depending on how long this goes. But it is also a direct attack on the US dollar. And if that happens, they're betting that they can get the American people to realize that this was a mistake, and that Donald Trump led them down a blind alley, and they are in deep trouble.
All right, and there's some more updates coming in. In fact, we've just been told that Sri Lanka has evacuated 208 crew members of an Iranian Navy vessel. This is President Anura Kumara Dissanayake saying that a day after US submarine struck and sank another Iranian frigate, that Sri Lanka has evacuated 208 crew members of another Iranian Navy vessel. Now, this is getting to be quite interesting because the manner in which this is playing out, another Iranian Navy vessel, Dr. Ashok Sajanar, that is now being evacuated. Clearly, there are fears that if this vessel had flown out of the port there in Hambantota, wherever it was in Sri Lanka, that this too could have been the subject of yet another attack, and that could have led to all sorts of escalations.
No, absolutely. You're very right, Madhav. And this is exactly what I was saying. What this is turning out to be is an all-out war. First it was America, Israel against Iran. Now, Iran decided to expand the scope of this war by including all the Gulf countries, all the 7-8 Gulf countries. And, to its own disadvantage, that is what I feel. I think it is a strategic blunder that Iran has committed, because although Mr. Pezeshkian comes out and says that, we, all the Gulf countries are our brothers, brethren, etc., but I think the fissures that have been created, because all these countries are extremely upset with Iran. But the implications of that is that the war has expanded. America has taken this action very far away from the coast, from the shores of Iran, to hit this ship, Iran can also, through its terrorist proxies, attack any of the other Israeli or American assets, any other part of the world, on any waters. And that brings a total whole new game, total uncertainty to the manner in which this war is being conducted.
Well, they say
And that
all's
is very
fair in love and
dangerous.
war, but the question that many would ask is that is it fair for other countries who are not part of this war to be dragged into it? I think that's the bottom line. With the war reaching India's doorstep, that's certainly a huge concern back home here in India. Ashok Sajanar, Dr. Anand Rangnathan, Sierra Claire, Ina Tangent, and Dr. Dorona Vital, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this evening.